All right, welcome back to another Shifting Schools free webinar. Thank you for those of you who are joining us. I've already got a comment this morning, Trisha. There are snow days happening around the US, and people are joining us because they're at home in their snow days. So, welcome those of you who finally get an opportunity to join us live. Today, we're going to be talking about backward chaining the creative writing process. We've got Trisha, our guru here. Trisha Freeman, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing really well. I'm surprised that I'm not the one having the snow day being out here in Ottawa. So, again, folks who are joining us, we always appreciate when you give up some of your time to spend with us. And of course, you can always reach out to us, info at Shifting Schools, if there are free resources or free webinars that you'd like to see Jeff and I get to work on. But today we are talking about the differentiation strategy known as backward chaining. So, the way that I like to explain this to folks is, I enjoy cooking, but Jeff, you know this about me. Late in the afternoon, that's like fatigue sets in, my energy levels just plummet. And so I actually use one of those like food recipe providers where everything comes prepackaged, the exact correct amount of ingredients come, it's all bundled up. And that gets me significantly closer to preparing dinner for my family, right? So backward chaining is, instead of saying, here's the whole project, here's the whole assignment, how can we help support students build confidence and just get a little bit closer to where they need to be by giving them some scaffolding, really giving them the tools, giving them something that helps them get started right away rather than have to figure all of the things out at once. So today we're going to focus on how we can use fiction podcasts to give students a starting point when it comes to creative writing. So inside the free guide, you'll be able to find, we've got templates. We'll talk about those in a minute. We have one specifically looking at high school, one specifically looking at middle school, and one specifically looking at primary school.
Awesome. If you want to follow along with us and download the free guide, you can scan the QR code on your screen that you see right now. I'm excited for this episode because it brings in two of our favorite things, the idea of writing and podcasting, of course, which Trisha and I, hosts of Shifting Schools, love the podcasting sector. So we're going to be able to bring those two things together and see how we support that in the learning process as well. Before we jump into today, though, I do need to talk about and thank our sponsor today, Quizalize. Quizalize.com is an online quiz creating tool that allows you to easily and simply create quizzes for your students. But I think the cool part is with a couple clicks of a button, you can gamify those quizzes. So it doesn't seem like just a multiple choice quiz or a true and false quiz. It's a game, and we start to gamify education. And as you see down at the bottom of your screen, now until December 4th, a special deal only for Shifting Schools listeners, Shifting Schools followers, the Shifting Schools community at large. You can save 80% off of a yearly subscription to their premium subscription. It works out to just over $1 a month. It's $14, I think, for the entire year that you get to use their premium service, which unlocks all kinds of extra goodies for you. So thank you to Quizalize for allowing us to being a sponsor of Shifting Schools and allowing us to bring this to you for free. So again, you can scan that QR code there in the corner, or every once in a while up here in the top corner, I'll put it up there now where you see the Quizalize symbol. I'll move that over. So as you are going through today's training, if you would like to scan that, download it, you can email it to yourself once it is downloaded as well. And Trisha, as we get started here today, what I love about this idea of backward chaining is creating shortcuts for students. And so we're going to go through a couple slides here. And again, all of this is in the packet that you get free when you scan that code. And to kind of walk us through here for high school, for high schoolers, what are kind of some of the shortcuts and some of the scaffolding we're putting in place?
And I should say, again, you're going to have to scan that QR code if you want to check out what we've put together for middle school or primary school. Again, a little short on time today, so we're just going to focus on what we have for high school, but the structures are very much the same. And Jeff, I want to point out there's also a covert agenda I have with using this differentiation strategy in conjunction with creative writing. And that's that I think fiction podcasts are a dramatically underused asset in the ELA classroom. Huge collection of fiction podcasts are 100% free. So, in terms of it being an accessible resource for our students, I think, it's difficult sometimes to say, like, oh, keep adding to your home library. That expense adds up quite quickly. And I would love to see more libraries, also having maybe it's like a QR code curated section where it's like, these are some fiction podcasts. If you love this book, you might also love this podcast. They're also really great for, if you've got friends or family you're separated from geographically, you can listen to the fiction podcast together and debrief. So again, I think they're a great asset to think a little bit more about how we use them. So when you go to our free guide, you'll find for either high school, middle school, or elementary school, what we've done is we've taken some of the heavy lifting out for you teachers. We've sort of done that backward chaining for you as well, where instead of saying, okay, first you've got to find the fiction podcast, we've identified one for you. So we also highlight on the page how long is the episode, so you know what you might be looking at. You can be thinking, would we listen to the whole episode in class? Would I assign this and students have already listened to it? So you have an episode of a show called Within the Wires, and you have writing template options that we'll look at in just a moment. You also have a peer feedback protocol. And then we have also done some of the research and we have given you the social media accounts related to that show. So if your students have done some creative writing that's been inspired by that show, share it back with those creators. Think about them as being maybe part of the authentic audience for the work that your students are doing. So we'll take a look now at what some of the writing template options entail. So on that Google document, we've given you again the link to the episode. For some of them, you would have the full transcript. So some podcasts will also give you the full text, which is really great. So you can take a look at that. And then we give you 3 different prompts. Now, some of the prompts might say, here's a line from the show, continue onwards. Some of the prompts might say, here's a part of the story, you remix those parts. And sometimes it's even about picking different adjectives or, again, just focusing in on some of those literary devices. But essentially, Jeff, what I love about this is when we teach creative writing for students who maybe are telling themselves this story of, I'm not creative, I'm not a good writer, I don't know where to start, how do I come up with a character? All of that gets set aside and we're saying, here's your characters, here's your scenario, here's even some of the language, and let's just play around with this as a mentor text. And then the other piece is, Jeff, you and I geek out in the world of podcasting all the time. It's an industry that's growing, folks, dramatically growing. So, in terms of talking to students about the future of work, what might it mean to be saying, hey, start working on some fiction podcast scripts? There are only going to be more and more and more fiction podcasts down the road.
Yeah, and what I love about this is, 2 things that you mentioned already. One, they're free. They're free resources waiting to be used in our classroom. And, number 2, this idea that we see students walking around nowadays that seem like they always have earbuds in. We're trying to figure out ways that we can use the cell phone in our classroom in engaging ways. Well, here's how you do it. If they're going to have their earbuds in, have them listen to a podcast. If you're going to be listening to something that adds value to you. What a great way to use the cell phone in the classroom. And it doesn't have to be a cell phone. The great thing is these are MP3 files. They play on the web, they play through any browser, but they also are really nice on the go inside of a student phone. And so it just gives you so much accessibility when you start thinking about how do you take these amazing free resources. And if you haven't listened to any fiction podcast yourself, you need to go out there and listen to some. There's a couple, and we're going to talk about one here in the show a little bit later today. From there, we go on to starting to think about how do we advocate for our feedback. Trisha, do you want to talk us through? This is one of my favorite slides, I think, in today's free guide.
So the thing is, Jeff, with all of our creative writing prompts, all of them are meant to be really completed in like a what I call like a sprint, right? It's a creative sprint. And this is a technique that I've used with students too, because, and I find this even myself as an adult learner. Sometimes, again, we're telling ourselves that story of, oh no, I'm not creative. And sometimes I actually find saying, hey, you know what? We're going to see where our rough draft thinking is within 15 minutes. Lower the stakes, lower the pressure. You might not get it completed, but we're just trying to make a start here. So 15 minutes goes by, students have selected their writing prompt, and then in either small groups or maybe pairs, they're going to get together to give each other feedback. Now, for me, some of my most crucial learning with this has been don't just partner students up and say, okay, give each other feedback. When I used to do that, I would find students would sort of be like, I don't know, it's fine, it's good, thumbs up, conversation over. So I'm a big believer in scaffolding that process too. And I also think it's really good for students to rehearse self advocacy. So, this is the menu that I would give them. And I would say, you pick, you tell your thought partner, this is the type of feedback that I need, right? Think about your own work, reflect. And then the feedback is really based on what that student has said they would like to learn more about. And it's where they're at emotionally, right? Like one of the items on the menu is, can you just please point out a positive? And sometimes we have days where I'm not ready to hear that critical feedback, and the critical feedback isn't going to help me. Maybe I've had a really, really hard, night before this class. So maybe I just need a little bit of that positive. Maybe I just need to boost, my feelings and my confidence. And I think it's good practice for students to, again, build that self-awareness and practice that self-advocacy.
Oh, and I think anytime that we can scaffold things like feedback for students, we are just doing them and us a favor. And that's what I love about these free guides that we have, where we, intentionally put in helping students to receive feedback. What does that mean? What do I need? What am I looking for? How can I advocate for what I want? And a lot of times, even as adults, we don't know. We don't know what we have. And so being able to have a menu where your goal is just to pick one thing. Pick one thing. Teachers, I can't stress that enough. You don't want students to pick all four. It's a menu. What's the one thing that you need to be supported today as a learner? And even for myself, there's some days where please just stop. I just need something positive. And there's other days where I'm prepared and I'm like, yeah, give me the horrible feedback. I want to be better. I'm in a mindset where I can go deeper into the mistakes that I made and I can grind it out. And just knowing and giving kids choice in making that is such a SEL thing to be doing in our classrooms. And I know we're really focused on SEL these days in our classrooms. So let's structure that feedback and help kids advocate for what do you need right now in this moment. It's just such a critical point to every lesson and every type of training that we have with students. Our last slide here then looks at the collaboration behind the Solar Podcast. Now, if you have not listened, I'm just going to go on a little rant here, Trisha. I hope that's okay.
Do it.
If you have not listened to the Solar Podcast, first of all, teachers, if you are into sci-fi fiction, you've got to go listen to this podcast. It is a auditory, incredible told story. And if you have a nice audio system at home, it's worth getting out of your earbuds and playing it on a nice audio system. It sounds great in earbuds as well. But I mean, the amount of work they put into this podcast, I think, goes to show, to your early point, Trisha, this is a new form of communication that is really starting to grow. And we're going to be seeing more and more of this for our students who are creative writers, for your ELA teachers out there, or social studies teachers, or world language teachers out there. How are we incorporating this new medium into our classroom? A, it's free. B, it's growing. C, we need to expose our students to some of the amazing things that it takes to pull this off. And one thing I love about this conversation is we actually got to talk with some of the people behind the scenes and how many different people it takes to pull off a podcast. It's unbelievable. It's a team. It's like creating a movie or a film. And there's so many little pieces that go into this. It's just an incredible incredible experience. And so I hope you enjoy this episode that we were able to sit down with them. Trisha, I'll let you talk now because I just could go on and on about the solar podcast. It's so good.
No, I'm a huge fan too. And that's why it was a great honor for us to, again, be able to put episode 232 together. Those creators also talk about feedback, what that means for them at the professional level. And I think that conversation really provokes some deeper thinking about collaborative writing, that it is a reality. I know sometimes as a teacher, when I've facilitated collaborative writing, sometimes students would be like, but when would people ever write something collaboratively? Fiction podcasts, wonderful example. And Jeff, the last thing I'll say is my other secret motivation here with doing something like this is that I think it's an absolute catalyst for literacy. So years and years ago, folks might remember when Serial, the podcast, became really popular. I was teaching a course called Theory of Knowledge at the time, and I was using that podcast. We were having conversations about the reliability of memory, right? Like, how is it that when we rely on our memory as truth and knowledge, can we really trust it? So that's a great, the first few episodes of that show are perfect for that. Here's what happened. The students only had to listen to the first 2 episodes. Every single one of my students finished that entire
Oh,
season.
wow.
And then they also were sharing with each other, after I listened to that, then I was listening to this. The same
Yeah.
thing happens with fiction podcasts. So we talk all the time about wanting readers to learn and be motivated to be lifelong readers. And I think by introducing them to fiction podcasts, you're giving them another opportunity of a whole other world of fiction to explore. And coming up to the holiday break, I think, it's interesting to recommend a few to families that might be worthwhile checking out together. And Solar, the podcast, I think that's a really great one. You've got preteens or teens in the house that love sci-fi. That is for sure an amazing podcast to listen to together, I think.
Yeah. And I think we're, to your point, I think we're in this time and space right now, just in where we are in human evolution, to be thinking about when we talk about this idea of reading, we need to expand that. For so long, reading was something that was done physically on paper. And then reading went from physically being on paper to ebooks and PDFs. And we have continually evolved this idea of what reading meant. I mean, when most people know this already, but I'm dyslexic. And for me, one of the coolest things was when I got my Mac, it started reading web pages to me. That was an incredible, like Trisha, I don't quote unquote read a lot of books, but audiobooks are the way that I read. And now I still know how to read, and I still read news, and I read and engage, and I want kids to learn how to read. But I think as educators, we have to expand. What does it mean to read? And it becomes more inclusive. That's what this is about. It's about being more inclusive. If you love digging into books, my wife, you love digging into physical books, fantastic, great. For me, that's not my thing. Give me some earbuds and an audiobook and I'm out. I'm just put me in a corner and let me listen all day. That's my way of reading. And I think we have to understand that what we're doing is this is an accessibility for all of our students. And I love that point. You just blew my mind. What a great time of year to expose kids to some of these. Listen to the first 2 episodes of Serial together. And then your kids are going to be on winter break going, oh, I'll go finish that podcast because you're into it. Right? I just love the way that we can expose students today to different ways of reading and just different ways of learning stuff altogether. So I'm so excited for this as we get going here. I'm going to put that QR code up there on the screen one last time. And I'm going to remind you down at the bottom of the screen, thank you again to Quizalize for being a sponsor of this episode. You can find all of our sponsors at Shifting Schools. We are honored to have a lot of different sponsors who help and support educators through our Shifting Schools community. But you can find all of the offers that are happening right now over at shiftingschools.com/offers. Again, the one for Quizalize that I'll throw up here on the screen is you get to save 80% when you sign up for a yearly premium subscription. It's literally $1.17 a month is what it works out to be. Why not give it a go? All you have to do is use that code Shifting Schools at checkout. So, Trisha, any final thoughts, words as we close this down for today?
Just if you like the ideas here and you're thinking, you know what, I'd love to know what other podcasts are great to explore with students. We do have another free guide over at shiftingschools.com when you go to our free resource library called Leveraging the Power of Podcasts. And we have curated lists again, for primary, middle, and high school students, both nonfiction and fiction podcasts. So, again, Jeff, I agree with you. Listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks is also reading. And if you want to boost literacy in that way, that might also be a free guide worth downloading.
All right. Thank you, Trisha. Thank you, everyone, for watching, talking about fiction podcasts for creative writing by Backwards Chaining. Until next time, we'll see you all on the network.